up, up. We're back! Oh, the last full route that we have to complete is Yamazaki, the best boy in my eyes. Yeah. Oh my god, it's coming to an end. Except for shenanigans that happen late at night. Anyway. This is a work of fiction if you haven't been able to tell. I can't read that all in one thing. I've tried before. Would you like to skip the prologue? Well, since this is the last full route and the last time we'll ever see this again because Chizuru's route literally just follows Saito's route up for the most part, we are gonna do the prologue. And it's been a while. And this is we're not button mashing anything this time around. So, yeah. I also have grapes as a snack. So this is Kyo. It was awfully impressive, no denying it. Even simple hellos between people passing in the street seemed warm and friendly. They nodded and smiled to one another, as if family and not strangers about on errands. Still, there was something else as well. Something making the city feel strangely cold. Almost as though there was a great invisible wall, shutting out anyone wandering from the country. I'm not sure if I belong here. No, it's all in my head. I walked quite some distance to reach Kyo, and both my mind and body were exhausted. Even so, tiredness was no reason to meander and feel sorry for myself. I couldn't afford to. すみません. I hesitantly stopped the passerby. I'm sorry, I seem to be a little lost. Could you... What am I supposed to do now? I was lost again, but in a different sort of way. I sighed and looked up at the darkening sky. The sun was beginning to set. People I'd spoken to showed me no unkindness, and had given me directions I needed, but... Was now really the best time to leave the city? Learning the person I'd hoped to visit had left town caused hope to seep from my crumbling resolve. The only person besides father I could rely on in the city who I could rely on was Matsumoto-sensei. Matsumoto-sensei was a doctor serving the shogunate. I had never met him myself, but my father put a great deal of trust in the man. He had told me that if I ran into any trouble in his absence, I was to contact Matsumoto-sensei. Unfortunately, Matsumoto-sensei was out on business and would not return for some time. Yep. Was I too hasty? Perhaps I should have waited. It is indeed rude to visit without warning, which is why I had sent a letter prior to my arrival, but it seemed he had left before reading my letter. Perhaps, I thought, I should have waited for a reply before traveling to an unfamiliar city. But I could no longer spend time waiting idly for news. Is something wrong, Father? He paused for a moment and looked at me.
実はな、しばらくの間、京の都へ行くことになった。
Is it for business again? He left the house often during that period, sometimes for days at a time. How long will he be gone?
それはわからん。一月になるか、二月になるか。
Oh. There was no hiding my disappointment. Nonetheless, I wasn't a child anymore. I couldn't beg him not to go or some other foolishness. Yes, I'd be lonely, but I was much more worried for him. Please, Father, be careful. They say that the city of Kyoto is dangerous. He only smiled and nodded.
安心しなさい。お前が心配しないように、京にいる間はできる限り手紙を書くよ。
Okay. You promise? Father kept his promise. A new letter arrived so often I scarcely had the time to respond before another would arrive. He told me that he worried about me being home all by myself. Then the letter stopped. A whole month passed with no word. Father, they say Kyoto is full of ronin. It is not a safe place. Usually a samurai is paid by their house, but ronin who report to no house often rob people in order to make ends meet. They're nothing more than violent criminals who hide behind the image of a samurai. Such is the state of the city of Kyoto, the city of ronin. Small wonder, then, that I worried for my father. My mind would concoct horrible possibilities, and I often found myself depressed and tense. First, I suppose I need to find a place to stay. Lost in thought, I didn't notice nightfall descended. If I was honest with myself... I hadn't the faintest idea of how long searching for him would take. I brought a negligible sum of money with me, enough to last me a month if used wisely. Finding father in this window of time was a must. Otherwise, I would have to depend on Matsumoto-sensei returning in this time, or else I'd be forced to return home without a word. Well, at any rate, I should try and be as frugal as possible. I lengthened my stride and set off on my path. Fortunately for me, men's clothing assisted with keeping a quicker pace than women's. Kyoto presented many dangers to a young girl, hoping to explore the city without direction. My disguise, such as it was, proved successful, and I'd safely made it all the way to Kyoto. Such success went to my head and led me to believe I could explore Kyoto as I pleaded. But Kyoto is not a safe place. I should have remembered that. Instead, I had somehow convinced myself that the city's hidden dangers didn't apply to me. I was about to discover otherwise. I spun around. In the street in front of me were 3 Ronin. Can I help you? I did my best to keep my voice calm, reaching nonchalantly for my kodachi. My father encouraged me to take sword lessons. I'd kept with them, and I did rather well. I was confident enough in defending myself. However, perhaps my overconfidence in myself is what served the situation at hand to me. I messed up and let my guard down. My fault. There was a chance I could take them on, but there were 3 of them and 1 of me. Only then did I realize they were far more interested in my sword than they were in me. But this is... The sword isn't just some blade I'd picked up. It's a family heirloom spanning generations. There was no way I could give it to the Ronin. Though, I had a feeling they wouldn't understand. In such a situation, the best decision was undoubtedly to retreat. I turned and ran as fast as my legs could. Gosh, they sure don't give up easily, do they? I felt like I'd been running for quite a while, but I could still hear the Ronin cursing loudly. I ducked into an alley flattening against the wall. After deciding they weren't too close, I crept further into the alley. Someone left a couple of sheets of wood leaning against one of the houses. A perfect hiding spot. What luck, I thought, kneeling down under them. This is my way to escape this mess. I was listening for sounds intently. A suspicious calm entered my mind. I'd expected to hear the Ronin yelling to each other, looking for me, but seconds turned into minutes. I heard nothing. I was about to sneak out and have a look when... What? My plan to investigate was immediately halted. Remaining silent and hidden was more important. Still... It was then that true fear began to set in. There was something dangerous out there. Something quite possibly lethal. My imagination conjured up no shortage of gruesome theories. Even so, I could feel an itch of curiosity. I wanted to know what was out there. Carefully, I peeked around the corner's edge. The cold reflection of moonlight upon a blade glared at me, and my eyes followed it to the arm that held it, clad in a coat of light blue. Had this person saved me? But no slower than it appeared, my hope vanished. I heard the Ronin stumbling to beg for his life. The person in the blue coat said nothing, just stepped forward, his sword raised. A high, screeching laugh cut the man's scream. The blade fell through the air like a butcher's knife rather than a sword. No skill, just death. The scream turned wet, caught, and disappeared like air leaving half-empty bellows. My eyes went wide. I had just witnessed a murder. Any strength I'd received vanished quickly. My legs gave way and I crumbled to the ground. My eyes widened like busted shells. He died with the first blow, but as I watched, the blades fell, carving lines into the corpse. The soft slip of a blade through flesh, the silent creep of blood across ground. I felt nothing from them but madness. Their only desire was raw, animalistic violence. Whatever they were, it wasn't human. They were broken. I could feel my throat clench tightly, and a warm dark smell brushed against my face. I slowly recognized the coppery tang of blood. An icy bolt of fear ran down my spine, crawling into my limbs and freezing me in place. I was terrified. What was I going to do? What could I do? You have to run, Chizuru. I forced my jaw open and drew a ragged breath. This was the only chance I'd get. I had to. My body, still numb with fear, was unresponsive. I lurched sideways against the stacked wood, and with a rough clatter, it collapsed. The creatures turned, coats drenched in blood. Their eyes locked with mine and bore into me. Hideous grins split their inhuman faces, shaking with excitement and prey to slaughter. I had to run. I couldn't die yet, but my legs refused to move. Their hideous, cackling laughter echoed. I was going to die. My body was frozen with terror. I couldn't even scream. This was it. This was the end. I watched them raise their bloody swords, the moon glinting off the metal. Then there was a flash of light and the soft splash of blood. I could feel it, warm and sticky. Bile began to rise in my throat, but before disgust took hold, I heard a voice. The words suggested disappointment, but the voice sounded happy.
僕一人で始末しちゃうつもりだったのに、はじめくん、こんな時に限って仕事が早いよね。
As he spoke, the strange man smiled, almost as if he were enjoying himself.
俺は務めを果たすべく動いたまでだ。あんたと違って俺に戦闘狂の気はない。
うわ、ひどい言い草だな。まるで僕が戦闘狂みたいだ。
He laughed.
否定はしないのか。
The man called Saito-san sighed with the air of a long-suffering companion and looked at me.
でもさ、あいつらがこの子を殺しちゃうまで黙って見てれば、僕たちの手間も省けたんじゃないかな。
His tone was light, but it confirmed my fears. I may have escaped the schemes of the Ronin, but I was ensnared by something much darker.
さあ、少なくともその判断は俺たちが下すべきものではない。
Then, who was in charge of these two? Their conversation led me to believe they were part of an organization. As I thought about it, I recalled hearing about men with blue coats. My thoughts were interrupted by a dark shape sliding into view. I swallowed hard. The moonlight shone off his smooth dark hair. For reasons I couldn't fathom, in that moment, the light on his hair made me think of the wistfulness of flower petals. It was almost as if the cherry trees were blossoming out of season.
運のないやつだ。
His voice was cold and quiet, like a blade of ice. Blue-white moonlight lit his slender face and shone from the blades pointed at my chest. But it wasn't the sword making my breath catch. It was his eyes. They were fierce and hard, but somewhere behind them, I could catch a glimpse of something else. There could be no doubt that he was prepared to kill me, and yet he looked troubled. Not kindness, but perhaps mercy?
いいか、逃げるなよ。背を向ければ切る。
I nodded. There was no doubt he meant every word he said. He stared at me for a moment, then grimaced and put his sword away, sighing. What? I was too surprised to stop myself from speaking, and it quickly became apparent that I wasn't the only one.
あれいいんですか土方さん。この子さっきの見ちゃったんですよ。
Dan! Hello, what is that? Oh, it's coffee! As he spoke to the man he called Hijikata-san, his eyes narrowed. The man called Hijikata-san frowned back at him. Hello. Things are fine. Did you see the last bit of Harada's route last night? I understand why Soma's route branches off of his now.
いちいち余計なことを喋るんじゃねえよ。
Yeah, so Soma wasn't the only one that got lucky.
下手な話を聞かせちまうと始末せざるを得なくなるだろうが。
Yeah. Also, the end was, do you want to know the end, actually? The after credit scene? The epilogue? They had a child. Harada and Chizuru had a child. They had a baby. They held hands? They held hands! Oops. It was clear enough that what I had seen was something they wanted to keep hidden. The more they said, the more I got it, and it was clearer none of us wanted such a thing. And it was clear none of us wanted such a thing. Bleh.
この子を生かしておいても厄介なことにしかならないと思いますけどね。
Harada is the only canonical ending where there's a child. The way he looked at me made me feel as if he'd read my mind.
とにかく殺せばいいってもんじゃねえだろう。こいつの処分は帰ってから決める。
俺は副長の判断に賛成です。ここに長くとどまれば他の者に見つかるかもしれない。
Then he looked down at the creature he'd killed, as though he'd forgotten the whole ordeal.
こうも血に狂うとはやはり実務に使える代物ではないようです。
頭の痛え話だ。
He peered down at the corpse, his face an emotionless mask. When he looked back up at his companions, however, his eyes narrowed.
つうかお前ら土方とか副長とか呼んでんじゃねえよ。せろ。
へえ、伏せるも何もこの大服を着てる時点でバレバレだと思いますけど。
He was right. Even I had heard stories about a gang of cruel men in blue coats who cut down people in the streets, but I didn't know how to confront the dilemma of pretending I didn't see any of these horrors. My mind swirled through a pool of worries and thoughts, almost as if I was being drawn into their world. A world where there is nothing strange in carrying on a normal conversation in the dead of night with corpses for company.
死体の処理はいかように肉体的な異常は特に現れていないようですが。
Hijikata-san thought for a moment before he spoke.
羽織だけ脱がせとけ。あとは観察の方で何とかする。
承知しました。
新選組の大使が切り殺されてるなんて僕たちにとっても一大事ですしね。
He gave a derisive bark of laughter.
ま、あとはここにいたやつが黙ってりゃ世間も勝手に納得してくれるだろう。
He looked directly at me, and I got the distinct feeling his words weren't for his companions. It was common for people to be murdered in Kyoto. It was a dangerous city, after all. I knew that, of course. But to see it happen? That was something else entirely. If death was such an easy thing in Kyoto, I thought, then the city itself must surely be mad.
ねえ、ところでさ、助けてあげたのにお礼の一つもないの。
I didn't realize right away he was speaking to me. When I did, my eyes went wide. What do you mean, you saved me? Well, he did have a point. Despite the threats, they saved my life. I stood up as steadily as I could manage, brushed some dirt off my clothes, and bowed. Thank you very much. I apologize for not thanking you earlier. There was so much going on, I was a little confused. I glanced up at them, tentatively. The man called Hajime. Oh, now we refer to him as Hajime. We didn't earlier. The man called Hajime also looked confused. His eyes were wide, and he had an expression I couldn't place. Hijikata-san looked as though he'd taken a bite of something sour. I sighed deeply before continuing. I know it seems weird to say that, but he told me I should say thanks, so I looked up. Saito-san and Hijikata-san both stared pointedly at anything but me, and the third man was shaking with laughter.
あ、ごめんごめん。そうだよね。僕が言ったんだもんね。
He broke out in laughter again, so much so that he was forced to wipe a few tears from his eyes as he straightened up.
どういたしまして。僕は沖田総司と言います。礼儀正しい子は嫌いじゃないよ。
Thank you for helping me. Not quite sure what else to do. I bowed again.
君を助けてくれたのが斉藤はじめくん。それでこっちの偉そうなのが。
わざわざ紹介してんじゃねえよ。
副長、お気持ちはわかりますが、まず移動を。
Whatever mirth was inspired was gone. The man called Saito-san now spoke with quite urgency. The man named Okita grabbed a hold of my wrist, smiled, and led us down the street. His grip was a touch too tight to be friendly, his fingers like iron cables around my arm. There was no question about my situation. I quickly picked up on the notion that if I were to run, I would be killed instantly. My life was in the hands of these strange men. I set my jaw and stood up as straight as I could. My eyes crept up from the blood-stained coat and met Saito-san's gaze.
己のために最悪を想定しておけ。さしていいようには転ばない。
His words were like a dagger in my stomach. What was going to happen to me? Was I going to die? As we walked through the bleak Kyoto night, I felt horror crawl its way up my spine once again. The cause of my horror wasn't the gruesome end that awaited me, but something else entirely. I spoke with these men and watched them speak, standing next to a warm corpse soaked in blood. That I had done such a thing terrified me in an altogether different way. Perhaps this is what it is like to go mad. Oh! Hold on, we'll skip in a second. There we go. Chapter 1. Speed. No, we're not button mashing though. Was it morning? What happened to me? I attempted to recollect myself. Ah, yes. Intro speedrun. Right. All at once, the events of the previous night rushed back to me. This isn't my room. My limbs were snugly bound in tight knots, so all I could do was wiggle around in bed, twisting the blankets around me. I yearned for the comfort of my own futon, but the futility of such thoughts only forced me to confront the reality of my situation. If only I could wake from this strange nightmare. But I could not. Those men from the night before must have taken me with them to the headquarters of the Shinsengumi. What will happen to me now? I inhaled deeply, lying down to await my fate. It was at that moment that the door slid open, and a kind-looking man stepped through.
ああ、目が覚めたかい。すまんな、こんな扱いで。今、縄を緩めるから少し待ってくれ。
And I am confirming now, as the anime has confirmed, the one that tied us up was Okita. His smile quirked as he removed my ropes. My wrists, however, were left bound. And you are?
ああ、そうか。私はね、井上源三郎というんだ。
Thank you, Inoue-san.
さて、ちょっと来てくれるかい？今朝から幹部連中であんたについて話し合っているんだが、ゆうべあんたが何を見たのか確かめておきたいってことになってね。
Okay. I nodded curtly and struggled to stand, but my body was sore from being bound up all night. Inoue-san treated me with something like courtesy, but it was clear that I was in a lesser position. He must have been able to guess my thoughts, however, because he smiled at me and winked.
心配しなくても大丈夫さ。なりは怖いが気のいい者たちばかりだよ。
Oh. Even at home, I heard rumors of the vicious Shinsengumi that were unflattering. It was hard to imagine that the people in charge of such an organization were gentlemen.
一番年の若い東堂君は君よりちょっと年上くらいだよ。それに長倉君と原田君という賑やかな二人組もいるから大丈夫。
Despite Inoue-san's reassurances, it was difficult for me to trust what I was hearing as accurate. Sumimasen. Inoue-san led me to a room and opened a door. I stepped inside and found myself surrounded by the leaders of the Shinsengumi. Their eyes dug into me like sharp knives. I stared before me and then gulped nervously.
おはよう。昨日はよく眠れた？
Well, it wasn't particularly comfortable.
ふん、そうなんだ。さっき僕が声をかけた時には君全然起きてくれなかったよね。幸せそうな寝顔でぐっすりだったみたいだけど。
What?
からかわれているだけだ。掃除はあんたの部屋になど行ってない。
Quite silently, I stared at Okita. With his grin still spread along his face, he glanced over to Saito-san.
もう少しこの子の反応を見たかったんだけどな。はじめくんもひどいよね。勝手にバラすなんてさ。
I don't think Saito-san did anything wrong. You, on the other hand. Well, I'll be here, Don.
おいてめえら、無駄口ばっか叩いてんじゃねえ。
Hijikata-san's voice brooked no further insubordination. Okita-san shrugged and fell silent, but the smile lingered through his bright eyes.
でさ、土方さん、そいつが目撃者。
The man who spoke was, well, he looked more like a boy than a man. Maybe this is the youthful Shinsengumi captain that Inoue was describing to me. I'd imagine the leaders of the Shinsengumi to be older, maybe even middle-aged men, but their faces were still blessed with youth. In fact, one might even confuse them at first glance for a gang of bohemian thugs.
ちっちゃいし細っこいな。まだガキだろこいつ。
お前がガキとか言うなよ、平助。
だな。世間様から見りゃ平助もこいつも似たようなもんだろうよ。
ガキ扱いしていいのは俺みたいな立派な大人になってからだぜ。
立派な大人って。まあ新八が言っても説得力も何もねえがな。
Stretch. Two nearby men replied to Toho-san with very mocking but light-hearted tones. I somewhat recalled Inoue-san's description of the two energetic members. His mention of them was brief, but seeing them in person was an eye-opening experience. He said the short-haired one was Nagakura, and the other, with longer hair, was Harada.
うるさいな。おじさん二人は黙ってなよ。
ふざけんなよこのお坊ちゃまが。俺らにそんな口聞いていいと思ってんのか？
平助におじさん呼ばわりされるほど年は食ってねえよ。新八はともかく俺はな。
てめえ裏切るのか佐野。
へへ、新八さん図星されて怒るって大人げねえよな。
Their back and forth rapport seemed developed into a rhythm from years of friendship, which predated my arrival and made me foreign here. I sensed something apart from curiosity towards me, though like a feeling of animosity. Despite their cheerful levity, They had not forgiven my presence. They had not forgotten my presence among them. Suddenly, I wanted very much to go home. I wanted to leave this place and never return. My chest tightened and I stared down, hoping to wake up in bed and with all of this only a memory.
口さがない方ばかりで申し訳ありません。あまり怖がらないでくださいね。
His voice was calm and warm, and I felt myself relax, even if only a little bit.
何言ってんだ。一番怖いのはあんただろう、三男さん。
As he finished speaking, the rest of the men nodded solemnly in agreement. I wondered, who could possibly command such fear and respect from these men?
おや、心外ですね。皆さんはともかく鬼の副長まで何をおっしゃるんです？私はいつだって新選組の規範を第一に考えているだけですよ。その規範ご法度を決めたのは土方君、君じゃなかったですか？
確かに決めたのは俺だ。だが今はそんなことを言ってる時じゃねえだろう。
And the man called Sanan-san and Hijikata-san stared at one another with a smirk.
トシと三男君は相変わらず仲が良いな。
Hijikata-san and Sanan-san sounded distant when they spoke to one another. Not exactly friendly. Still, the man who spoke had certainly sounded as though he thought they were friends.
ああ、自己紹介が遅れたな。俺が新選組局長、近藤勇だ。
When you say chief, do you mean to say you are the most important man in the Shinsengumi?
いや、まあ、俺が偉いわけじゃない。皆の代表ということだよ。それから、そこの都市が副長で、横にいる三男君は総長を務めていて。
いや、近藤さん。なんでいろいろ教えてやってんだよ、あんたは。
まずいのか？
情報を与える必要がないんだったら黙ってる方が得策なんじゃないですかね。
わざわざ教えてやる義理はないと思うけど。
確かにそうなんだが、紹介しないことには話が進まんだろう。
Harada-san glanced over at Kondo-san and let out a bark of laughter.
ま、ここまで来たら知られて困ることもねえけどな。
Kondo-san had looked rather disappointed when Hijikata-san spoke, but he perked up at Harada's words. Despite knowing him for 5 minutes, it's easy to see that his words resonated well with his men. He had a sort of charisma that simply drew you in, a man who was impossible to hate.
さて、本題に入ろう。まずは改めて昨晩の話を聞かせてくれるか。
はい。昨晩京の都を夜間巡察中に不老の老師と遭遇。相手が刀を抜いたため切り合いとなりました。一部の大使らが老師を無力化しましたが、その折彼らが失敗した様子をこの者に目撃されています。
As he finished, Sato-san turned to look at me. I didn't see anything. Even with my insistence, Hijikata-san continued to stare at me with a harsh glance. Sato-san remained expressionless, and the smile on Okita-san's face didn't change.
なあ、お前本当に何も見てないのか？
I didn't see anything.
見てないんならいいんだけどさ。
あれ、掃除の話じゃお前が大使どもを助けてくれたって話だったが。
No, that's not true. I glanced over at Okita-san, but his smile remained. Whatever he was thinking was a mystery to me. I was running away from the Ronin. Then some people with Shinsengumi uniforms appeared. Really, they sort of rescued me.
つまり大使どもが老子を切り殺してる場面はしっかり見たってわけだな。
I couldn't exactly deny that. However, I knew that choosing to stay silent would implicate me deeper than lying would.
つまり最初から最後まで一部始終を見てたってことか。お前根が素直なんだろうな。それ自体は悪いことじゃないんだろうが。
I wasn't sure what to make of Harada's words. My presence seemed bad for the Shinsengumi. Would their next words be ones commending me to death for being at the wrong place and time? My voice shook, but I knew I had to try. I won't tell anyone. I promise.
偶然老子に絡まれていたという君が私たちに敵対するものとまでは言いませんが、君に言うつもりがなくとも相手の誘導尋問に乗せられる可能性はある。
His voice was still warm, but his words were cold, and I began to feel my chances at life slip away.
話さないというのは簡単だ。この者が新選組に義理立てする理由もない。
約束を破らない保証なんてないですし、やっぱり解放するのは難しいですよね。ほら、殺しちゃいましょうよ。口封じするならそれが一番じゃないですか。
But
そうじ、物騒なことを言うな。お上の民をむやみに殺して何とする。
そんな顔しないでくださいよ。今のはただの冗談ですから。
あんたは冗談に聞こえる冗談を言え。
after being rebuked by Sato-san, Okita-san gave a playful smile.
しかしなんとかならんのかね。まだこんな子供だろう。
私も何とかしてあげたいとは思いますが、うっかり漏らされでもしたら一大事です。さて、私は副長のご意見を伺いたいのですが、いかがですか、土方副長。
The man looked at Hijikata-san, listening intently. He sighed and glanced around the room.
俺たちは昨晩指導に背いた大使を粛清した。こいつはその現場に居合わせた。
それだけだとおっしゃりたいんですか。
実際このガキの認識なんざその程度のもんだとは思うんだが。
けどよ、こればっかりは大義のためにも内密にしなきゃなんねえことだよな。新選組の大使は血に狂ってるなんて噂が立ちゃ、俺らのタイムにだって支障が出るぜ。
No, fool. No. Shinpachi's words made sense to everyone. Hijikata-san's face looked grim.
おい、言葉を慎め。俺は指導に背いた大使を粛清したと言ってはずだぞ。
でもまあ、どっちみち見たことは変わらないんですけどね。
宗司の意見にも一理あると思うが、まあ、俺は土方さんや近藤さんの決定にしたの。
Move the mic.
俺は逃がしてやってもいいと思う。こいつは別にあいつらが血に狂った理由を知っちまったわけでもないんだしさ。
What do you mean, everything? I couldn't help but wonder aloud, and the mood in the room shifted to an icy silence.
スケ、余計な情報をくれてやるな。
悪い。
ああ、これでますます君の無罪放免が難しくなっちゃったね。
男子たるもの死ぬ覚悟くらいできてんだろ。お前も諦めて腹くくっちまいな。
A man? Oh, that's right. They still believed me to be a boy. With everything else that had happened, I'd completely forgotten how I was dressed.
確かに潔く死ぬのも男の道だな。俺も若い頃は切腹したし。
When you were young, huh?
佐野の場合まだ生きてるけどな。
Their jokes were barbaric, but they both broke into raucous laughter.
副長、結論も出ないことですし、一旦この者を部屋に戻してはどうでしょうか。同席させた状態で誰かが機密を漏らせば、処分も何も殺すほかなくなります。
He was right. If I remained with them, then I could easily hear something I wasn't supposed to. I didn't think he'd mention it for my sake, but rather as a possible concern for their group. I was still relieved when he brought it up.
そういうことにするか。ちょっと調べたいこともあるし。
私もその判断には賛成しますよ。ここには迂闊な方も多いですしね。
三男さん、わざわざこっち見て言うとかきついよ。
まあ仕方ねえよ。迂闊なのは俺らの担当だろ。主に平助とかな。
そんな責めるなよ。俺だって悪気はなかったんだからさ。
I could hear Todo-san's voice rise as everyone turned to look at him. He looked at them for a bit, then turned to me and mumbled in a voice I could barely hear.
あのさ、悪かったな。
I was still apprehensive about what they might do to me, so I couldn't quite respond to him well. But he seemed to understand, and I curtly managed to nod. It was the most I could manage.
それじゃ斉藤、こいつを頼む。
承知しました。
Oops. Alright. After returning to my room, I'd spent some time reflecting upon my state and my ill-bound hands. Alright. The rumors spoke of the Shinsengumi as vicious men, but they seemed more intimate, human to me. Still, their presence or their being lingered through me. As if to say, we are not killers, but to protect our code we must bring death. Remaining here is only bringing me closer to the possibility of them killing me. I don't know if I can convince them to spare me. Just as I have known loyalty to them, they have known loyalty to me, only the Shinsengumi. But then, they mentioned a man must always be ready to face death, so are they still mistaking me for a man? Could I possibly risk exposing my true identity in exchange for mercy on my life? But this could just easily backfire for me, and it could exact an even worse fate. My God, I can't read. I was truly at a loss for words for what to do. Find a way to escape is our first thing on the guide. There was nothing for it. I had to try and escape. Meaning I needed to get moving immediately. Staying in this room did nothing to help me. Fortunately, they hadn't bothered to tie me up completely again. Only my hands were bound. That would slow me down, certainly. But so long as I could move my legs, I stood a chance. Alright now. The exit is... I cast my memory back to when they brought me into the building the night before. Right. I'm sure it would work out. I stood up. Holding my breath, I edged towards the door. I knew it was rude, but I had no choice but to try and slide the door and open the sliding door with my toe. But I was almost there when suddenly it flew open all on its own, revealing...
No!
Ah! I stumbled straight into Kondo-san.
ずいぶん大胆な方ですね。まさか逃げるつもりだったんですか？勝手に動いては困りますね。君の身が余計に危うくなるだけですよ。
His voice was calm and not unfriendly, but his eyes were frigid and calculating. Too late I realized why they hadn't bothered to tie me up again. They'd been watching me.
逃げれば切る。ゆうべ俺は確かにそう言ったはずだ。
残念だけど殺しちゃうしかないかな。約束を破る子の言葉なんて信用できないからね。
Okita-san smiled. He didn't look very sorry. I stayed where I was. You won't give me a chance to explain myself? I was innocent, but complaining wasn't going to help me. Perhaps it would be best if I simply accepted my death. Then you may do whatever you like with me. Okita-san roared with laughter, his shoulders shaking. The anger in my voice proved unaffecting to them.
君、面白いね。でも、ちょっといじめすぎちゃったかな。もう少し肩の力抜いてよ。取って食べたりしないからさ。
What do you want? You were just talking about killing me.
君みたいに潔い女の子、初めて見たよ。
Huh? A girl? You knew I was a girl?
宗司はこの少年が女子だというのか？
近藤さん、落ち着いてくれ。気づいてるやつは気づいてたみたいだが、あんたはまず分かってねえと思ってたが。
もしかして三男君も気づいていたのか？
ええ、一生懸命に男装を試みてますが、どこから見ても女の子です。
さあ、お兄さんたちに話してごらん。女の子が男装してまで夜の京を歩いていた理由。
Okita-san. Sanan shrugged and let out a loud sigh.
もう一度皆を集めましょうか。意見を変えるものが出るかもしれませんからね。
There I was, surrounded once again by the leaders of the Shinsengumi.
少年にしては華奢で可愛らしい顔をしていると思っていたんだが、まさか本当に女子だったとはな。
Kono-san was nodding his head repeatedly as if he were agreeing with a very intelligent suggestion. For him to notice the softness of my features, it flattered me a bit.
まあ、女だって聞いてから見ると女にしか見えなくなってくるんだよな。
しかし女の子を一晩縄で縛っておくとは悪いことをしたね。
でもよ、女だって言うが別に証拠はないんだろ。
Proof?
証拠も何も一目瞭然だろうが。なんなら脱がせてみるか？
許さんぞ。衆目の中、女子に肌をさらさせるなど言語道断。
だがまあ、それが一番手っ取り早いと思ったんだ。無理にとは言わないがな。
My God, how did I?
でもよ、本当に女だって言うなら殺しちまうのも忍びねえよな。
何甘いこと言ってるんだ。男だろうが女だろうが性別の違いは生かす理由にならねえだろ
う。もっともです。ですが女性に限らず、そもそも人を殺すのは忍びないことですよ。今日の治安を守るために組織された私たちが無益な殺生をするわけにはいきません。
結局女の子だろうが男の子だろうが今日の平安を乱しかねないなら話は別ですよね。
The Shinsengumi had already suffered very gruesome reputation in Kyoto. If rumors spread that their men were thirsty for blood, things weren't likely to go well for them. Kyoto would banish them, and with no one to protect the people, the city would erupt into chaos. Each of their members deeply understood the consequences of behaving rashly in these times.
悪いが、お前の荷物を改めさせてもらったぞ。どうやら江戸からここまで一人で来たみてえだな。荷物はわずかな着替えと一月分の小銭、それと数通の手紙とこの小立ち。手紙には幕府御殿医の松本良順の名前が。おそらくそこを訪ねたんだ。お前の目的は何だ？
The minute my name was spoken, the vibe in the room shifted immensely. Everyone wore a stunned expression, eyes wide, and no words were uttered in response until...
土方さん、その名前は？
おいおい、偶然にしちゃって行き過ぎだぜ。
まあ待て。それを判断するためにもまずは君の話を聞かせてくれるかな。
At Kondo-san's behest, I stood up to speak. My name is Chizuru Yukimura. Under the watchful eyes of the leaders, I sharply described how I came to face them, how I lived in Edo, how did I come to Kyoto to find my father, how lonely the city felt before I arrived.
そうか。出身も江戸だったのだな。父上を探して遠路はるばる京に来たのか。してお父上は何という方かね。
My father is Kodo Yukimura.
つながった
What are you talking about?
あなたが持っていた手紙の筆跡、これはまさに光道さんのものでしたが、まさか本当に光道さんのご息女とはね。
Mm-hmm. You know my father? The silence was enough to tell me that the revelation of my parentage caused a pronounced change in their behavior.
どこまで知ってる？
What information are you talking about?
いいから洗いざらい全部吐け！何しに今日に来やがった？
I just came to look for my father. I swear I don't know anything else.
親父の光道さんが何をしてるか知っててここに来たんだろうが。
I was only aware of my father being in Kyoto for his medical work, but I haven't seen him since last summer. That's all I know.
土方君、どうやら本当に何も知らないのかもしれませんよ。
So what do you know about my father? Where is he right now? Please, tell me.
光道さんの行方は現在新選組でも探している。
You're after my father? So this means...
あ、勘違いしないでね。僕たちは光道さんを狙ってるわけじゃないから。
I see. A huge wave of relief came over me.
同じ幕府側の協力者なんだけど、実は彼、夏から行方知れずなんだよね。
幕府をよく思わない者たちが光道さんに目をつけた可能性が高い。
I let out an audible gasp, but let the sun continue without paying me any mind.
生きている降参も高い。乱方医は利用価値がある存在だ。
I wasn't sure what else to do, so I nodded. My heart pounded in my chest, threatening to burst onto the floor.
近藤さん、どうでしょうか。 同じ人物を探す者同士、彼女に手を貸してあげてはいかがかと。
手を貸すとはどういうことかね。
行動さんが見つかるまで互いに協力し合うということです。彼女に協力してもらうことで行動さんが見つかる可能性は格段に上昇するでしょう。
あ、
私たちがいくら探しても姿形を変えられてしまっては見抜くことは難しい。ですが行動さんの娘である君ならば身なりが変わっていようと看破できますね。
Of course. I nodded as I spoke, while giving him what I hoped seemed like a steady, reassuring smile.
それに彼女が手中にあるというのは何かと都合がいいと思います。
どうだトシ、三男君の意見に俺は賛成だ。
こいつが本当に何も知らねえって言うんなら。
It's true. All I know is that my father headed to Kyoto, but I don't know anything else. And about last night, I didn't see anything.
まあ、あの乱暴医の娘となりゃ殺しちまうわけにもいかねえか。
His eyes narrowed as he looked down at me.
昨べの件は忘れるって言うんなら、父親が見つかるまでお前を保護してやる。
君の父上を見つけるためならば、我ら新選組は協力は惜しまんとも。
Thank you so much. I never imagined something like this. I was elated to have escaped death, but not only had I survived, but I'd found my first decent lead.
殺されずに済んでよかったね。とりあえずはだけど。
He gave me that same wolfish grin. There was no denying that my situation was still less than desirable, but it didn't matter for now. I'm very glad. Against all odds, at least, I'd found help where I'd never have expected it. The Shinsengumi. My first day in Kyoto was quite the adventure. In spite of everything I'd seen, my fortune was improving with every step. I still had a long way to go, but keeping positive was my only hope.
雪村君、よかったね。これからはよろしく頼むよ。
Thank you. It's a pleasure for me as well.
なあ源さん、女子となればここのような男女体では申し訳ない気がするんだが。
ええ、そうですね。これはちょっと困りましたな。
Kono-san crossed his arms and thought deeply.
不便があれば言うといい。その都度可能な範囲で対処しよう。
Thank you.
まあ女の子となりゃ手厚くもてなさんといかんよな。
新八さん女の子に弱いもんな。でもだからって手のひら返すの早すぎ。
いいじゃねえか。これで豚書が華やかになると思えば新八に限らずはしゃぎたくもなるだろう。
I wasn't entirely sure I believed that sentiment.
とはいえここでは女性として扱うのは難しそうです。大使として扱うのもまた問題ですし、彼女の処遇は少し考えなければなりませんね。
なら誰かの交渉にすりゃいいだろう。近藤さんとか三男さんとか。
やだな土方さん。そういう時は言い出しっぺが責任取らなくちゃ。
ああ、そうだな。都市のそばなら安心だ。
そういうことで土方君、彼女のことよろしくお願いしますね。
てめえら 勝手に決めてるんじゃねえ。
As I watched their back and forth, some of my earlier relief began to ebb away. And this is how the Shinsengumi had come to look after me. Mid-February, 1864. I slid the door open and met a breath of cool morning air. Clumps of thick clouds trundled silently over the city, an unusual strong wind driving them along. It's cold today. I shivered a bit and grabbed my jacket from the other door to wrap around myself. A week had passed since I'd begun living in the headquarters of the Shinsengumi. I was given a room of my own, but they made it clear that I wasn't to roam freely. They weren't the best accommodations, but given how close I was to being murdered by them instead, I thought it'd be best... And by them, instead, I thought it'd be best not to complain. Still, do I really need to dress like this all the time? I sighed, staring at my feet on the cold floor. They'd given me temporary accommodations, but it wasn't without its strict conditions.
お前の身柄は新選組預かりとする。が、女として屯所へ置くわけにはいかねえ。新選組にかくまわれている女がいる。そんな話が万一にも広まれば、よくねえ勘繰りをする奴も出てくる。それに、噂を聞いて行動さんを狙っている奴らが、お前まで狙い出すかもしれねえ。もちろん行動さんが狙われていると確定したわけじゃねえがな。こういう不確定要素が多い現状で迂闊な行動は取れねえってことだ。だからお前には断層を続けてもらう。面倒だろうがそれでいい。
Clear. His reasoning was sound. Perhaps more than that, I knew he was concerned not only for the Shinsengumi, but also for the safety of my father and myself. I didn't have a choice regardless, but keeping this in mind made his orders more palatable.
それに、たとえ君にその気がなくとも、女性の存在は体内の風紀を乱しかねない。ですから私たち幹部のほか大使たちへも君の事情は話しません。情報はそれこそどこから広まるか分かりませんからね。
I understand the situation. So what should I do while I'm here?
屯所じゃ何もしなくていい。部屋を一つやるから引きこもってろ。
あれおかしいな。この子誰かさんの故障になるんじゃなかったですか？
いいか掃除。てめえは余計な口出しせずに黙ってろ。
Before long, I'd been there for a week. I guess I don't have much of a choice. No sense in dwelling on what I can't do after all. Although it was still a new sensation, I'd grown comfortable in dressing like a boy, particularly the feeling of wearing pants. I straightened up and touched the kodachi that Hijikata-san had given back to me. This was a familiar friend of mine. The blade by my hip stretching back as far as I can recall. According to my father, this was an important heirloom passed down to the Yukimura clan. As such, I was forced to take lessons in swordplay, making me well aware of what the blade was capable of. I had never cared much for weapons. Weapons hurt people, which is an obvious factor, but it was more than that, at least for me. For as far back as I could remember, any wounds I suffered healed at an incredible rate. Small cuts would disappear overnight. As a child, I thought nothing of it, But as I grew older, I began to realize that I was not quite normal. My father insisted it was a gift of the gods, but that I should tell no one of it. I didn't tell anyone, of course. I was afraid they would treat me like a monster if they knew. Ever since then, I'd done my best not to get hurt. I stayed as far away from blades as I could, and before I realized it, I developed a fear of them. My constant need for disguise was frustrating, but my condition left me more unsettled. Still, that wasn't the only thing on my mind. The rank-and-file soldiers treated me coldly. I'm not just imagining it, right? I learned having a private room was a privilege, even for captains. For a child to arrive and receive better treatment than their own captains. No surprise, really, for the soldiers to hate me. True, I suppose I can't really blame them. I was enjoying the Shinsengumi's hospitality, and so I felt I should help them in some way, but I knew nothing of soldiers and their ways. I gave as much effort as possible, despite Hijikata-san's commands for me to remain in my room. How does one calm the lonely, restless mind? I think for the soldiers, whenever the captains or other officials would look out for me, it appears as if they were giving me special treatment. They're just watching me. To make sure I kept my mouth shut, they took turns keeping watch over me. Any mistake on my part would cause huge trouble, so they were making an effort to keep me contained. Even if I could speak with the soldiers, what conversations would we share? Nothing? My only respite from any possibility of detection would be to stay alone. Again. All I wanted from this, though, was to find my father. Even though they'd promised to help me, keeping me locked here without the ability to leave was no better than being tied up. Just when I felt like I'd made some progress into my journey, my search was kept to a halt. Perhaps, I thought, I could talk to Kichikata-san if he would give me permission to look for my father. Oh no, that's right. Hijikata-san had recently departed to Osaka. Well, if Hijikata-san's not here, I wasn't sure what to do. We stayed put. To be completely honest, staying in the room was awfully boring. Now, considering your predicament, you need to follow Hijikata-san's orders, Chizuru. I didn't want to cause a disturbance on top of what I'd done. The consequences would be... What am I doing here? A forlorn malaise wafted over me. The room was nice, of course, but also practically empty. I wasn't uncomfortable, I suppose, but not comfortable either, and nothing passed the time. Here I thought I'd gotten used to doing nothing. My father's business required him to take trips frequently, sometimes for days at a time, and so I'd spend a good deal of time home on my own. This isn't quite the same, though. Back then, I always knew he'd be back eventually. Waiting for someone you knew would return, and waiting for what you don't quite know, are two very different things. Well, when will I be able to start looking for father again, I wonder? My reflections all manifested into sighs eventually.
探したぞ雪村君。ここにいるとは思わなんだ。
Kondo-san smiled brilliantly at me as he stepped into the room, holding a tray in his hands. I'm sorry? I wasn't sure what to make of his words, so instead I silently bowed.
いや、待てよ。もしや ここが君の部屋なのか？
For now, yes.
なんと、これは女子の部屋に無断で立ち入ってしまったというわけか。
Oh, no, it's fine. The door was open and everything. After all, it isn't as though there's anything here I wouldn't want you to see.
都市の故障というからには都市の隣部屋かと思っていたのだが。
Ha! Hijikata-san had, of course, failed to tell Kono-san that I had yet to be made a page. I wasn't surprised. It wasn't too hard to see what was going on. I'm not really prepared to entertain, but you're welcome to come in if you'd like.
そうか。では失礼してお邪魔させてもらおう。だが、そうかしこまらんでくれ。君は我ら新選組の客人のようなものだからな。
Then he placed a tray on the floor between us. This is... I looked down at the tray. I could barely stifle a sudden squeal of excitement.
君は甘いものは好きかね。茶菓子の棚にコンペイトーがあったのでな、持ってきたんだ。
On the plate, he'd arranged several colorful candies and a cup of warm green tea.
どうかね、雪村君。嫌いでなければぜひ食べてみないか。
I forgot I need to buy myself some conpeito. I have a jar over there and it's empty.
さあ、遠慮は無用だぞ。
Thank you very much. I cautiously reached to take one of the candies. It's delicious. Well, the real term should be oishii. It had been a while since I had any sweets. Something about the small colorful candy seemed so adorable that I couldn't help but smile.
そうか、気に入ってくれたみたいで何よりだ。
Kono-san possessed a warm presence. A warming presence that made me feel safe as he watched me eat.
そういえば、まだ外出の許可は出ていないそうだな。
It's true, but it seems better to know my place. Rushing things would only make more trouble. So just as Hijikata-san suggested, I plan on waiting it out just a little more.
なるほど。分かってくれて嬉しい。ああ見えてトシは昔から他人に世話を焼かないでいられない性分だからな。
Hijikata caring? Wow! I had no idea! Kono-san's view of Hijikata-san seemed so at odds with my own personal experience with him. Of course, though Kono-san is intimately familiar with him, I'm sure, so perhaps there's no way of knowing who this man really is. Wow, I had no idea.
確かにな。知らない人からはよくそう言われるよ。おそらくだが、トシはまだ時期じゃないと思ってるのだろう。だから退屈だろうが、もうしばらく我慢してくれ。
I understand. He hadn't done much, to be honest, but Kono-san's visit had cheered me up greatly. Of course, the conditions of staying in my room were left unchanged. However, the creature comforts of spending an afternoon drinking warm tea gave me some life. Time stood still, shadows drifting along my wall. How long am I going to do this? Solitude was proving detrimental to any glimmer of hope. My heart felt heavier with each moment. How lonely the wistful, forlorn mind can become. Oop. I'd been swept up in a frightening world I didn't understand and couldn't possibly control. I can't possibly figure out what's happening to Father if I'm stuck here. Only Hijikata-san could give me permission to leave, and he's gone. All I could do was wait. Laminating things I couldn't change wouldn't improve my situation, and would arguably make it worse. I knew I couldn't trust the men of the Shinsengumi completely. They were, after all, men who could take life in the blink of an eye. It would be just as easy for them to end my life. Well, at least they've all been nice to me. For now. They're nice men deep down, right?
君さ、騙されやすい性格とか言われない？
What are you doing here?
あれ？もしかして気づいてなかったとか？この時間帯は僕が君の監視役なんだけどな。
Did you hear everything I said? He heard me. He had definitely heard me. I wanted to scream, but before I could open my mouth, Saito-san stepped out from behind a door.
そうじ、無駄話はそれくらいにしておけ。
Wait, were you here the whole time too?
つい先ほど来たばかりだ
Oh, thank goodness. I'm sorry for screaming like that.
気にするな。そもそも今の独り言は聞かれて困るような内容でもないだろう。
True, I didn't say anything, bad, but still. Well, I was just embarrassed to be caught talking to myself. Saito-san watched me fidgeting and mumbling. His eyes pierced right through me.
夕飯の支度が済んだのだが、邪魔をしただろうか。
No, nothing at all.
あんたと掃除の話に一区切りついたら声をかけるつもりだったんだが、放っておくと長引きそうだったからな。話の腰を折らせてもらった。
Sato-san shrugged shortly before we caught the sound of footsteps approaching us noisily. Heisuke shot through the door. The moment he saw us, however, his face fell.
あのさ、飯の時間なんだけど。
すまん、平介。今行く。
ああ、お前も急げって。早くしねえと食うものなくなっちまうからさ。
Sorry, Toto-san. I'll be there as soon as I can. He turned to leave, but he halted in his tracks. He pressed his small lips together before speaking.
なあ、その東堂さんってやめない？みんな平介って呼ぶからそれでいいよ。
Are you sure?
年も近いからその方がしっくりするし。あとそのデスマスもやめようぜ。
Alright, I'll do that then, Heisuke.
そうそう、それでいいや。じゃあ早く行こうぜ。
ようやく来たか。
おめえら遅えんだよ。この俺の腹の高鳴りをどうしてくれんだ。
新八さん、それってただ腹が鳴ってるだけだろ。困るよね、こういう単純な人。
お前らが来るまで食い始めるのを待っててやった。俺様の寛大な腹に感謝しやがれ。
新八、それ寛大な心だろ。それじゃいつものように自分の飯は自分で守れよ。
今日も相変わらずせこい夕飯だよな。というわけで隣の晩ご飯突撃だ。弱肉強食の時代、俺様がいただくぜ。
ちょっと新八さん、なんで俺のおかずばっか狙うかな。
それは体の大きさだ。大きいやつにはそれなりに食う量が必要なんだよ。
じゃあ育ち盛りの俺はもっともっと食わないとね。
毎回毎回こんなんで済まないな。
Oh, I've gotten used to it. Oh, okay, Dan. Also, hi!
慣れとは恐ろしいものだな。
Oh, why aren't you taking anything?
うん。あんまりお腹いっぱいに食べるとバカになるしね。
おいおい、バカとは聞き捨て。だがその飯はいただくぜ。
Oh god, not the backwards again.
どうぞどうぞ。僕はお酒をちびちびしてればいいし。
んじゃ俺も酒にするかな。
ただご飯とか気にしないで。お腹いっぱい食べるんだよ。
Ah, Dan! I know. I can't help but feel a little bad though.
気にしなくてもいいが、自分の飯は自分で守れ。
Always eating alone made the experience of dinner with these men both an exhilarating and a frightening evening for me. It was actually fun.
最初からそうやって笑ってろ。俺らもお前を悪いようにはしないさ。
Hanada. His mouth curled up into an honest smile of his own. Ah. Oh god, that took me a second to read. Oh boy. Had I really looked so down? Perhaps they were all trying to cheer me up. I wasn't quite sure how to feel. I was conflicted over whether or not to feel pity for myself, or to appreciate the moment for what it was. The joy seemed to be winning out, however, and I caught myself smiling as Inoue-san entered the room. Oh my god.
ちょっといいかいみんな。
As usual, his voice was warm, but in his eyes was a level of solemnity I'd never seen before, at least during our brief acquaintance thus far. The warmth of the room slowly evaporated.
大阪にいるトシさんから手紙が届いたんだが、三男さんがタイム中に重傷を負ったらしい。
What?
何があったの？
ああ、二人が訪ねる大阪の呉服屋に老師たちが無理やり押し入ったらしい。
What? God, no, what are you doing to my brain, Dan?
駆けつけたトシさんと三男さんがなんとか老師たちを退けたらしいが、その時に切られたそうなんだ。
Is he going to be alright?
相当の深手だと手紙に書いてあるけど、傷は左腕とのことだ。剣を握るのは難しいみたいだが、命に別状はないそうだよ。
Oh, thank goodness. I exhaled as a brief sigh of relief, but the rest of the room was tense, still itching for answers. Okay, that one I could read. God damn it.
数日中には豚書へたどり着くんじゃないかな。それじゃ、私はイサミさんと話があるから。
He turned as he spoke, his last words delivered over his shoulder, and he was gone. It was Saito-san who soon broke the awkward silence.
剣が握れないほどの深手か。腕の筋まで立たれているかもしれん。刀は片腕で容易に扱えるものではない。最悪三男さんは二度と真剣を震えない。
Oh. At last, I understood.
片腕で扱えば刀の威力は損なわれる。そしてつばぜり合いになれば確実に負ける。
薬でも何でも使ってもらうしかないですね。 三男さんも納得してくれるんじゃないかな。
掃除めったなこと言うもんじゃねえ。幹部が羅刹になってどうするんだよ。
Oh god. What? Oh. Oh, Jesus Christ. Dan! Huh? Wait, that didn't make any sense. What are the Furies?
ああ、羅刹ってのは薬を飲んだら怪我も治っちまう。
平助
Before I could move, Harada was on his feet and halfway across the room. I barely had time to gasp before he drove his fist into Heisuke. Heisuke, are you alright?
やりすぎだぞ佐野。悪かったな平助。先に口を滑らせたこっちも悪かった。
大丈夫か？悪かったな。
After a moment, Harada curtly nodded to Heisuke in apology, and later offering a quick pained smile. The latter offering a quick pained smile.
いや、今のは俺が悪かったけど、たくさんのさんはすぐ手が出るんだからな。
His punch had enough force to knock out a lesser man, but Heisuke seemed unfazed. It was never clearer how different these men were.
今の話は君が聞いちゃいけないことにほんのちょっと首を突っ込んだところだ。これ以上のことは教えられねえんだ。気になるだろうけど何も聞かないでほしい。それとさっきの平助の話は忘れてくれ。
His voice was friendly, but his eyes gave his words a cold weight that made me feel uncomfortable. What do you mean? Dan?
羅刹っていうのはかわいそうな子たちのことだよ。
Okita's voice was flat, emotionless. A sudden chill of melancholy entered his eyes. I couldn't bring myself to say anything more. Thankfully, Nagakura broke the awkward silence.
お前さんは何も気にしなくていいんだって。だからそんな顔するなよ。
I was only a guest in their house, not a warrior of the Shinsengumi. The truth of the Shinsengumi secrets were no business of mine, something I'd known. There was little value in that sentiment, however.
忘れろ。深く踏み込めば、あんたの生き死ににも関わりかねない。
Are you in a depresso espresso mode? I bit my lip and kept silent. The wall between us was almost tangible, almost far too large an obstacle for me to defeat easily. I feel the depresso espresso! Ah! I'm sleepy. I finished my dinner in sad silence, excused myself, and returned to my room. God damn it, Dan. I had a great deal to think about. Furious, huh? I wondered to myself if the Furies referred to the Rakshasa pictured in Buddhist texts. Though I wasn't well versed, I recalled reading a text about a man-eating demon god with that name. God damn it. I have no idea where to start from. Drinking the medicine to Captain becoming a fury. No, I wasn't supposed to think about those things. I was only going to get myself in trouble if I stuck my nose where it didn't belong. Hearing or seeing or hearing the word thing. Oh wait. Hearing or seeing or hearing the wrong thing could kill me. If I die, I'll have a hard time looking for my father. Yeah, 'cause you'd be dead. The Shinsengumi captains are keeping themselves hush around me, especially about the fairies. Are they doing it to protect me? Even if I dug around, I'm sure nothing would come of me. With that in mind, I did my best to clear my head of the evening's events. Blah, 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 blah. If you die, it's for a long time. Yeah, it is for a long time, Dan. With that in mind, I did my best to clear my head of the evening's events and slipped into my futon. Disneyland, what? March 1864. It fast approached a month since I began living with the Shinsengumi headquarters. Hijikata-san and Sana-san finally returned to the compound from their trip to Osaka, but spirits were low. Sana-san's injury had unforeseen consequences for everyone in the organization. Day-to-day operations became hectic for a while. His wounds seemed quite dire, and they drained whatever goodness in his nature he'd hoped to keep. Sana-san would spend most days holed up in his room, protected by a barrier of impenetrable silence. If he were to leave his room, the rare occasion now, he was often short-tempered. I've never been to Disneyland, so I don't know what this means or what the experience is like. I also never been in a near-death situation either, so I have zero clue. If he were to leave his room, a rare occasion now, he was often short-tempered and quickly retreated. Even though I too spent days in the exile of my room, he seemed to take it much differently. Sun seemed trapped within the painful memory, each day bringing him closer to a gloomy twilight. Maybe it is. Maybe that is what Disneyland is. I safely pondered what service I could offer to the Shinsengumi if I were not allowed to search for my father. I'm sure Hijikata-san is overwhelmed with whatever business he's dealing with, but I need to visit him. I crept around the hall looking for Hijikata-san, but he was nowhere to be seen. Would it be impolite to visit his room directly? As I paced around the hall in contemplation, an unknown warrior appeared before me. I had been living in the Yagi residence for a month, but he was unfamiliar to me. My current dilemma compelled me to approach him. Sumimasen, have you seen Hijikata-san? The man turned to respond, and my eyes widened to scan his enormous frame before he spoke.
お前はどこの誰だ? なぜここにいる?
I am... Well, it's a long story.
誰だと聞いている? 答えろ.
I'm Shizuru Yukimura.
ほう。副長が故障に取り立てたという見習い大使とはお前のことか?
I wasn't aware they were telling people that I was an apprentice warrior at headquarters. However, my reputation was the last thing on my mind as I faced this man's pressuring gaze. I didn't appreciate the hard scrutiny he seemed to impose, scanning me from head to toe.
お前、局長や副長とはどんな関係だ？同じ江戸の出身らしいが、どんな縁故を使って取り入った？
I did no such thing.
そう向きになるところを見ると、ますます怪しいぞ。ここはお前のような剣の腕も才覚もなさそうなものがうろうろしていいところではないんだがな。もう一度聞く。どうやってあの二人に取り入った？この私、武田観柳斎が聞いているのだぞ。なぜ答えない？
He grew increasingly agitated, almost like a petulant child, because I refused to answer him.
おい武田、こんなところで何をしている？
When he recognized Hijikata-san's voice, he snapped his hand back to his side.
これは土方副長。何？近藤局長に少々用がありましてね。
ほう、俺は何も聞いちゃいないが。
最近お姿が見えない三段総長の代わりに相談に乗ってほしいと言われているのです。しかし近藤局長もいらっしゃらないようなので、私はこれで失礼します。
Takeda turned to take his leave, but then he slowed his step, leaving us with a few words.
ところで、土方副長、そのものを故障に取り立てたというのは本当ですか？
ああ、少しばかり訳ありでな。
承知しました。訳ありならば、詳しく聞くのはやめておきましょう。ですが、あまり同じ郷里のものばかりを周りに囲うのはいかがなものかと思います。では、失礼。
Once Takeda exited the hall, I couldn't help but feel a rush of relief.
おい雪村、本所の中を勝手に歩くんじゃねえ。
Yes, sir. I didn't mean to cause trouble.
お前の正体を知っているのはこのヤギ邸に寝起きしてるやつだけだ。前川邸からこっちに来るやつらにも気をつけろ。
Clear. I promise to be more careful going forward. So may I ask who that man was?
あいつか、5番組組長の武田観柳斎ってやつだ。腕はそこそこだが、文学だが軍学の多少の知恵を持ってるやつだ。抜け目のないやつだから気をつけろ。それから用がないならお前もこの辺でうろうろしてないで部屋に戻っていろ。
Hijikata-san attempted to dismiss me, having said what he felt was appropriate as a stern commander. I asked Hijikata if I could help around the compound. I didn't get many chances to see Hijikata-san, so I took the opportunity to offer my aid to the house. No. I actually have a favor to ask of you, Hijikata-san. Staying in my room for long periods alone makes me feel terribly useless. Would you please give me something to do? I'll do anything. Cleaning, laundry, anything. Hijikata-san sensed the sincerity of my plea, and it appeared as though he actually considered it.
部屋にこもっているのはそんなに退屈か？
Well, a little.
わかった。源さんに伝えておくから、後で指示を仰ぐ。
Really?
その代わり、あまり外から来たやつと関わるんじゃねえぞ。いいな。
Understood, but thank you so much. The next day, Inoue informed me that I was given more freedom with the headquarters, which allowed me to exit my room freely. My duties included cleaning, laundry, and cooking. Not the most glamorous of chores, of course. However, it gave me an opportunity to occupy myself as opposed to going stir crazy in my room. Oh, that's what we're... Oh. Keanu Reeves. What? Where did Keanu Reeves come from? Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Oh my god. I need to get up. Elf Keanu trees. What the hell? I need to get up. Keanu lost his dog, Keanu Reeves. Oh my lord. What else are you got, Dan? How far does this go? Oh, I heard thunder. Wait. There's like clouds in the sky, but it's still sunny. Piano Reeves. I'll keep going till we get to the 2-hour mark. With Keanu Reeves! What the hell? Anyway, March 18th. No, June. Right? The 4th year of the Bankyu era became the Ganji Ganen, and the summer sweetly blossomed. Spring shed its blossoming skin, giving birth to lush green trees facing the wide open sky. Oh my god. During one of these beautiful summer days, I finished cleaning after everyone ate breakfast, and Saito-san brought me to the hall to Hijikata-san.
副長、斉藤です。雪村を連れて参りました。
入る。
Saito-san responded by quietly opening the sliding doors, gesturing me into the room. Upon entering, I saw Hijikata-san, but also Okita-san, Nagakura, Harada, and Heisuke in the hall. I knew that's where you were going with it, damn it! Goodbye, Dan. It appeared that only the captains, who were aware of my situation, were present.
随分と長く待たせたな。お前を外に出してやる時が来た。
Oh my god! Really? I could barely contain the excitement in my voice, and as soon as the words came out of his mouth. So, is it true there was a man in Fushimi that matched my father's profile?
真偽は定かじゃねえが。本人かどうかは娘のお前に確かめてもらうのが一番だと思ってな。
I nodded in response. For now, any information pertaining to my father was appreciated, so I was thankful. So, where's this man who supposedly looks like my father?
伏見にある寺田屋って宿だ。これから斎藤に確かめに行ってもらう。
Saito-san is assigned. I wasn't sure if that meant I was to accompany Saito-san or if I would have to wait longer for him. Then Harada chimed in.
だが、行動さんがまだそこに留まってるとは限らねえだろう。
ああ、伏見にいたってことは今日の街中をうろついてる可能性もある。
その通りだ。だから原田と新八、それから平助の巡察にこいつを同行させて高堂さんを探してもらってもいい。
俺たち全員で？いつもは手分けして順番に見回りしてるのに。
Hijikata-san didn't bother entertaining a response, instead looking towards me. Was he suggesting... Were these the men who were responsible for dealing with me should I attempt to flee? Heisuke must have sensed this as well as he made no attempt to push the issue any further.
言いたいことは分かりましたけど、この子の重りを僕たちに任せっぱなしってのは気に入らないな。今日は確か土方さんも外出する予定が入ってましたよね。今後のためにも可愛い故障を同行させていろいろ勉強させたらどうですか？
何を言ってやがる。こいつが俺の故障っつうのはお前が勝手に言ってただけだろうが。
でも他の大使たちは完全にそう信じ込んでるみたいですよ。嘘から出た誠なんて言葉もありますし、相応の仕事をさせた方がいいんじゃないですか。
As Okita-san and Hijikata-san bickered at one another, the mood of the room was locked in their tense words until Harada whispered to me.
まあ、今の今日は物騒だし、無理に出かける必要はねえと思うぜ。俺たちも一応、高堂さんの顔はわかるんだしな。
I could look for my father in Fushimi or join the patrol rounds, assuming he's moved places, or stay here to keep safe from the outside, or accompany Hijikata-san as his page. What should I do? Well, the guide says accompany Hijikata-san as his page. In that case, please allow me to accompany you, Hijikata-san.
おい、お前まで何を言い出すんだ。
Hijikata-san's voice trembled irritably, as if troubled by my suggestion, which made me nervous, but I thought I had a shot to convincing him. I mean, walking around town with you may help with getting leads to find my father. With the other warriors questioning my place, it may be our best interest for me to act like your page. It could convince the others. I recalled, in this moment, my introduction to Takeda, who voiced his skepticism plainly. After sharing my viewpoint, Hijikata-san's expression soured, then he responded,
あのな、宗司の言うことをバカ正直に受け取るんじゃねえ。こいつは面白がって。
可愛い故障ができてよかったですね、土方さん。
Hijikata-san stared bitterly towards Okita, and again it seemed we were trapped in their bubble of silence, but eventually...
わかった。ただし、俺の仕事の邪魔はするんじゃねえぞ。
I understand. I was somewhat surprised he obliged me, but I was so excited to join Hijikata-san and go outside. It's been almost 5 months since I've been able to experience the world and its scenery.
たく、どうしてこんなことになっちまったんだ。
Hijikata-san kept himself a few paces ahead of me, deliberately, and his foul mood made me nervous. His cold demeanor caused me to question whether or not I belonged here, if this was my place. It was difficult to learn these questions to and fro in my head. It was difficult to turn these questions to and fro in my head, but I was trying to keep up with him. Someone called out as we passed the tea shop.
副長、こちらにいらっしゃいましたか。実はご報告しなければならないことがありまして。
If this person referred to Hijikata-san as commander, then he must be a Shinsengumi member. He whispered the report in Hijikata-san's ear. The man's words caused Hijikata-san's face to turn blank, and he looked to me to speak.
給与ができた。お前はこの店に残ってコードさんの聞き込みをしている。
But then I'd be by myself. Would that be alright with you? In response, Hijikata-san gave me an examining glance as if to probe all my hidden thoughts, then looked down at me while asking,
お前は逃げるために俺にくっついてきたのか？
When his eyes met mine, the pit of my stomach dropped, turning cold for nervousness. No, of course not.
ならつまらねえ質問するんじゃねえ。やることをやって待ってろ。いいな。
Okay, understood. I wasn't sure what Hijikata-san's intentions were by leaving me behind, but it's time to go, I think. I hear thunder, and that's not a good sign. That means the power can go out, and I don't want my computer to suffer more of these blackouts. So, save time. Huh, alright. But yeah, I'm leaving that for now. We'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. EST for more Hakuoki Kyoto Winds doing Yamazaki's route, and I'm doing it all the way through. We may or may not have a stream tonight. It depends if the weather isn't shit. And depends who is available as well, because we usually have people on board than just myself. So, please drink water. Have a good day or night. Don't die because you didn't drink water. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.